Let's look at your scapula. So if you recall from a previous video, if you watched it, we talked about two common scapular dysfunctions. I talked about the protracted scapula, and I talked about kind of the winged scapula. And so let's just kind of revisit these. We talked about some fixating muscles. So generally, this would be your spine. If you had a protracted scapula, it means that the medial border closest to the spine has kind of protruded itself outward right there. The shoulder has kind of come forward in this capacity, and what's evident is when you're looking at the person from behind is a noticeable line here of the medial border sticking out, it's protruding. And generally this is basically a weakness or lengthening of the rhomboids, not able to hold this medial border up against the rib cage, coupled by the serratus anterior muscles, which are on the inside of the scapula here, kind of wrapping themselves around the rib cage, and they're pulling the scapula this way. That's an easy fix. That's just scapular retraction exercise. This X, which is the pec minor and the lower traps. And that's when you start getting what? Because the pec minor pulls down, you're getting a anterior tilting of the scapula where the top of it tilts down, and what becomes evident is the inferior angle, and it can be coupled with a protracted scapula. And this is generally called a winged scapula. When you look at the person's scapula, it's not just the medial border, but the actual inferior angle that's very noticeable. And that's a bigger problem to resolve, because this creates more dysfunction, because part of the movement of the arm going overhead is a posterior tilting of the scapula. And if the scapula is held in an anterior tilt, it has little ability to posterior tilt. So we have to resolve that challenge first. So generally in corrective exercise, we go off to the winged scapula, which is this relationship in the X, the pec minor to the lower lats, and the protraction and retraction is going to be this arm of the X. So how do we address that? Well, if you look at the scapula, if this is your rib cage right here, and that's your scapula, I somehow have to get this inferior angle back to move back towards the rib cage, and at the same time I've got to get the superior portion of the scapula to fall backwards. Well, that means I've got to release the pec minor. So if you get your pec minor, a ball, your fingers, anything that you can use your fingers through here if you wanted to. So I'm just going to use my fingers because it's easier to see what I'm doing. And the whole idea is, with the arm kind of relaxed at your side, is find the kind of the C shape of your clavicle, and that sits right above the second rib. And then if you just walk down maybe, let's call it an inch to an inch and a half, you're kind of moving into the pec minor, which is the originating from the third, fourth, and fifth ribs, and you're kind of getting into that area. And if you kind of dig in there, you feel a little tenderness. So that's your pec minor. So with some constant pressure on there, I want you to move. And we talked about some myofacial techniques. I want you to move your arm around. You can also do some posterior tilting, which is taking arm back here and pulling that shoulder blade back. So it's almost like you're taking the scapula and tilting back. Simply taking arm to the small of the back, pulling the top of your shoulder down. But while you do that, keep the pressure. So move this arm around. And what you're doing is you're getting a little bit of release of that tight pec minor. Because now what's going to allow us to do is, if that pec minor is released, it's going to give us a greater opportunity to do what? To push that thing in and allow this to fall back. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use gravity, and we're going to use a little device. We're going to lie you on your back. So if this is your rib cage right now, these two structures, your rib cage and your scapula, are not parallel. I'm trying to get them parallel. So what I'm going to use is the pressure of the ball and the effects of gravity to try and do what? Force the scapula into that position. And that's going to require the pec minor to allow that superior portion of the scapula to fall back.